I died. Not the dramatic kind of death you see in movies. No car crash, no terminal illness with time for tearful goodbyes. I had a brain aneurysm at my desk at 9:47 p.m. while finishing the quarterly reconciliation that nobody else in the finance department knew how to do. I remember the sudden pressure behind my eyes, my hand cramping around my mouse, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was 26 again, sitting in the same coffee shop where I'd met her 5 years earlier. Lynn May sat across from me, her resume clutched in her hands, her eyes wide and hopeful. She wore a cream blouse that was slightly too big, and her makeup was understated, almost no makeup at all. She looked soft, harmless, grateful. I knew better now. "Thank you so much for meeting me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been applying everywhere, but nobody will even give me an interview. When you reached out, I almost couldn't believe it." In my first life, I'd felt sorry for her and I'd seen myself in her desperation. I'd been there once, fresh out of college with a degree and no experience, sending out hundreds of applications into the void. So when my boss asked if I knew anyone who might be good for an entry-level accounting position, I'd thought of Lynn May. We'd gone to the same university, though she was 2 years behind me. I'd seen her posts in the alumni job search group, increasingly desperate as the months wore on. I'd vouched for her. I'd trained her personally, staying late to walk her through our systems, covering for her mistakes, teaching her everything I knew. I'd introduced her to everyone who mattered, helped her navigate office politics, even lent her money when she said her mom needed surgery. And she'd smiled that soft, grateful smile the entire time she was planning to destroy me. "I'm happy to help," I heard myself say, the words automatic, even though everything in me wanted to throw my coffee in her face. "Why don't you tell me about your experience?" She launched into the same practice spiel I'd heard before, padding her thin resume with exaggerations about her coursework and a 3-month internship at her uncle's company. I nodded along, watching her with new eyes. She was pretty in an understated way. The kind of pretty that made men want to protect her, that made women want to mother her. She knew it too. She wielded her helplessness like a weapon, and I'd been too stupid to see it the first time. Not this time. This time, I knew exactly how it would play out. She'd start in 2 weeks. I'd train her like before because refusing would raise questions I didn't want to answer. She'd be sweet and deferential for the first 6 months, always bringing me coffee, always thanking me for my patience, always playing the role of devoted mentee. Then Marcus Chen would transfer to our office. Marcus, with his Stanford MBA and his family connections and his eyes that looked at me like I was a piece of furniture. Marcus, who would take one look at Lin May's doe eyes and soft voice and decide she was worth his attention in a way I never was. Marcus, who would become our new department head in 8 months and would listen when Lin May whispered that I was territorial, that I took credit for her work, that I was blocking her advancement because I was threatened by her potential. I'd been fired on a Wednesday, exactly 1 year and 4 months from now. They'd called it restructuring. They'd offered me 2 weeks severance and a neutral reference. I'd trained Lin May to take over my accounts. My accounts, the ones I'd built from scratch, the ones nobody else understood, because I'd still been naive enough to believe that doing good work mattered. She'd lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, an external audit found discrepancies in the Chen Industries account, our biggest client, the one that represented 40% of our revenue. The errors cascaded from there. The Westfield reconciliation was wrong. The Harrison portfolio had been completely mismanaged. 3 months of journal entries had been coded incorrectly, creating a nightmare for tax purposes. But I'd been gone by then, already working at a competitor for less money, still trying to rebuild my reputation from the whisper campaign Lin May had waged against me. I'd heard about the chaos secondhand, through former colleagues who suddenly remembered I existed now that everything was falling apart. I'd heard they'd tried to get me back. I'd heard Lin May had been reassigned to data entry. I'd heard Marcus had been demoted. But I'd also heard that nobody could fully untangle the mess. The company had lost the Chen Industries account. They'd laid off a third of the staff. They'd never really recovered. And I'd never really recovered either. I'd spent the next 4 years in a smaller role at a smaller company, always wondering if the whispers had followed me, always waiting for someone to ask why I'd really left my last position. I died alone in an office at 9:47 p.m., and nobody had found me until the cleaning crew came through at midnight. I wasn't going to let it happen again. This sounds perfect, I said, cutting off Lin May's rambling explanation of her proficiency in Excel. I'll submit your resume to my boss today. I think you'd be a great fit for our team. Her face lit up, and for a moment I saw genuine emotion there. Relief, hope, gratitude. It almost made me feel guilty. Almost. Really? Oh my God, thank you. I promise I won't let you down. I'm a really hard worker, and I learn fast, and I'm sure you'll do great. I lied, gathering my things. I'll be in touch. I left her there, probably already mentally spending her first paycheck, and stepped out into the spring afternoon. The sun was warm on my face, and I tilted my head back, breathing in air that tasted like possibility. I had 1 year and 4 months to prepare. The next morning, I walked into Chen and Ta. Associates at 7:30 a.m., same as always. The office was still mostly empty, just me, Jerry from IT, who'd been here all night fixing something, and Patricia, the office manager who started at 6 a.m. because she liked the quiet. Early bird, Patricia said, not looking up from her computer. She was in her late 50s, had been with the company for 20 years, and noticed everything. In my first life, I'd never bothered to get to know her beyond pleasantries. Big day, I said, setting my bag on my desk. Got a lot to catch up on. This was true, though not in the way she'd assume. I pulled up my files and started taking inventory. I'd been at Chen & Associates for 3 years in my first life, 5 if you counted from this moment. I was a senior accountant, which sounded impressive, but really meant I did the work of 3 people for the salary of 1. I managed our 5 largest client accounts, trained new hires, filled in when people went on vacation, and handled any special projects my boss didn't want to deal with. I was good at my job, better than good. I was exceptional. I could see patterns in data that others missed, catch errors before they became problems, streamline processes that had been bloated for years. I'd automated half my workload with Excel macros and had a system for everything, and I'd never been appreciated for any of it. In my first life, I'd thought that working hard would be enough. I'd thought that results would speak for themselves. I'd kept my head down, stayed late, came in early, and believed that eventually someone would notice. They had noticed. They'd noticed that I'd do anything they asked without complaint. They'd noticed that I never pushed back, never demanded raises, never threatened to leave. They'd noticed that I was useful, but they'd never valued me. This time would be different. This time, I wasn't going to work hard to prove myself. I was going to work hard to make myself indispensable. And then, I was about to say in it, going to let them throw me away. I pulled up the Chen Industries file first. It was our crown jewel, a manufacturing conglomerate that had been with us since before I was hired. The account was legendarily complicated. They had 17 subsidiaries, operations in 6 countries, and an ownership structure that looked like it had been designed by someone having a fever dream. I was the only person in the office who understood it. When I'd started, the account had been managed by Richard Yang, a senior partner who'd retired 2 years into my tenure. He'd handed it off to me with a 3-hour crash course and a pat on the shoulder, saying, "You'll figure it out." I had figured it out, spending weeks reverse engineering his system, fixing his mistakes, and building my own processes. I documented everything meticulously because that's what good accountants did. I had procedure manuals, flowcharts, reference guides. I'd even created training materials thinking that someday I'd need to pass this knowledge on to a successor. Those documents were going to be my insurance policy. Over the next week, I went through every file, every account, every process I'd ever created. I made sure everything was documented perfectly, but I also made sure that documentation was just incomplete enough to be useless without me. The Chen Industries Manual, for example, walked through the basic reconciliation process, but left out the crucial detail about the subsidiary holding structures. The Westfield Investment Portfolio Guide covered the standard transactions, but didn't mention the special handling required for their alternative investments. The Harrison Estate account documentation was technically complete, but written in such dense financial jargon that anyone without my specific background knowledge would be lost. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was doing my job exactly as well as I'd always done it. I was just making sure that my knowledge looked transferable on paper while being practically irreplaceable in reality. Lin May started on a Monday. I'd requested that morning off, a dental appointment I'd scheduled months ago, I told my boss, so I wasn't there for her arrival. Let someone else do the welcome wagon routine. When I came in at noon, she was already set up at the desk next to mine, her few personal items arranged just so: a photo of her parents, a small succulent in a ceramic pot, a motivational quote in a frame that read, "She believed she could, so she did." I almost laughed. "Zoe!" She jumped up when she saw me, her face breaking into that warm, grateful smile I remembered too well. "They said you were out this morning. I was hoping to see you." "Dentist," I said shortly, setting my bag down. "Welcome to the team." "Thank you again for the recommendation. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done if— It's fine." I cut her off, turning to my computer. "You should probably check in with David. He's the one who'll be handling your training." This was a lie. I would be handling her training same as before, but I wanted to see if she'd push back, if she'd show any sign of the calculating woman I knew she'd become. She didn't. She just nodded, still smiling. "Of course, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity." "Sure," I said and turned away. David Chen, no relation to Marcus Chen, though the shared surname would cause confusion later, was our department manager and my direct supervisor. He was competent but lazy, happy to delegate anything complicated to me while he focused on strategic initiatives, which mostly meant golf with clients. "Zoe!" He caught me on my way to the break room. "Got a minute?" I followed him into his office, already knowing what he was going to say. "So, Lin Mei seems great, very eager. I'm going to have you take point on her training. You're best equipped for it, and honestly, I don't have the bandwidth right now. The Westfield portfolio is demanding a lot of attention." The Westfield portfolio was demanding attention because David had been ignoring it for months, but I didn't point that out. "Happy to help," I said. "What accounts will she be taking over?" "We'll start her on some of the smaller clients. Robertson, the Lee Family Trust. Maybe the Morrison account. Once she's up to speed, we can shift some of your workload over to her. You've been carrying a lot, and I know that's not sustainable long term." In my first life, I'd been thrilled by this. Finally, some help. Finally, recognition that I was overworked. I'd thrown myself into training Lin Mei, seeing it as an investment in my own future work-life balance. I'd been an idiot. "Sounds good," I said now. "I'll put together a training schedule." "Great. And Zoe?" David leaned back in his chair, trying to look casual. "I've been meaning to talk to you about your performance. You've been doing excellent work, really excellent. I'm going to be recommending you for senior associate when the promotion cycle comes around." Senior associate. A fancy title and maybe a 5% raise. In my first life, I'd been so excited about the prospect that I'd worked even harder, trying to prove I deserved it. I'd never gotten it. By the time promotions were announced, Lin Mei had already started her campaign, Marcus had already arrived, and I was already on the chopping block. "I appreciate that," I said evenly. "I'll keep up the good work." Training Lin Mei was exactly as tedious as I remembered. She was eager but sloppy, enthusiastic but careless. She'd nod along to my explanations and then make the same mistake 3 times in a row. She'd promise to read the reference materials and then ask questions that were clearly answered in the first paragraph. She'd stay late to catch up, but I'd find her watching YouTube videos when I walked past her desk. But she was sweet about it, always apologetic, always grateful, always making me feel like I was being too harsh when I corrected her, even though I kept my tone perfectly professional. "I'm so sorry. Eyes," she'd say, her eyes welling up. "I'm trying really hard. I know I'm not picking this up as fast as you probably did. I just don't want to disappoint you." And then I'd feel guilty for being frustrated, even though her mistakes meant I had to redo her work. Even though her trying really hard meant staying late to fix her errors instead of going home. I watched myself fall into the same patterns as before, and I let it happen. Because this was part of the plan. I needed everyone to see me as Lin Mei's mentor, her champion, the person who'd brought her in and was responsible for her success. I needed them to see me staying late to help her, being patient with her mistakes, covering for her when she struggled. Because when she eventually turned on me, that betrayal would sting. And when she failed after I was gone, the contrast would be undeniable. 3 weeks into her tenure, Marcus Chen showed up. I was in the break room when I heard Patricia's voice rise with false sweetness. the tone she reserved for people she considered important. Welcome to Chen and Associates. We're so excited to have you joining us. I poured my coffee slowly, listening. Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting started. His voice was deep, confident, with the kind of casual authority that came from never having been told no. Is David Chen around? I believe we have a meeting scheduled. He's in his office. I'll let him know you're here. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Coffee would be great. Black, no sugar. Of course he drank his coffee black. Of course. I added cream and sugar to mine, too much of both, making it sickeningly sweet, and walked back to my desk. A few minutes later, David emerged from his office with Marcus in tow doing the rounds of introductions. Marcus Chen was exactly as I remembered, tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of haircut that cost more than my monthly car payment. He wore a navy suit that fit perfectly, and when he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. He was 31, had an MBA from Stanford, and was the nephew of Stephen Chen, our CEO. He was being brought in to modernize our operations, which really meant his family wanted to give him a respectable position until he was ready to take over something more important. This is Zoe Lin, one of our senior accountants, David said when they reached my desk. She manages several of our key accounts and has been instrumental in training our new team members. I stood and shook Marcus's hand. His grip was firm, professional, completely impersonal. His eyes slid past me almost immediately, already looking for someone more interesting. Nice to meet you, he said automatically. Welcome to the team, I replied, equally automatic. And then his gaze landed on Lin Mei, who was walking back from the printer with a stack of papers clutched to her chest. She nearly ran into them, pulled up short, and the papers slipped from her grasp, scattering across the floor. Oh God, I'm so sorry. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather them up. No problem, Marcus said, and I watched his entire demeanor shift. He crouched down to help her, suddenly warm, suddenly engaged. These things happen. I'm such a klutz. She looked up at him through her lashes, her cheeks flushed. I'm Lin Mei. I just started a few weeks ago. Marcus Chen. I'm the new operations director. They smiled at each other, and I felt nothing. No jealousy, no anger, just a cold, satisfied recognition. Right on schedule. Lin Mei gathered her papers and stood, Marcus standing with her. Thank you for helping. That was so embarrassing. Don't worry about it. He was still smiling, and this time it did reach his eyes. I'm sure we'll be working together. I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone on the team. Me too, she said softly. I sat back, down, and returned to my work, tuning out their conversation. David was explaining Marcus's role. Marcus was asking polite questions. Lin Mei was laughing at something that wasn't funny. Let them play their little game. I had work to do. Over the next few months, I watched the same story unfold for the second time. But now I was a spectator to my own life instead of an unwitting participant. Marcus settled into his role, immediately making changes that he called optimizations, and I called meddling with things he didn't understand. He wanted to implement new software, restructure our filing systems, and create efficiency metrics that would track our productivity. I nodded along in meetings, offered mild feedback when asked, and continued doing my job exactly as I always had. If the new system slowed me down, I stayed late. If his changes created problems, I fixed them quietly. I was the model employee, flexible, capable, uncomplaining. Meanwhile, Lin Mei bloomed. She started dressing better, pencil skirts instead of loose pants, fitted blouses instead of baggy tops. She got better at her job too, though better was relative. She still made mistakes, but she learned to hide them more effectively, to ask me to review her work right before deadlines, so I'd catch the errors with no time to make her fix them herself. And she got close to Marcus. It started professionally, her asking his advice about a project, him taking her under his wing to mentor her. Then it became personal. Coffee meetings that ran long, lunch breaks that stretched into the afternoon. His hand on the small of her back as he guided her through the door. I watched him fall for her calculated helplessness, her wide-eyed admiration, her way of making him feel like a hero for explaining basic concepts. I watched her work the same magic on him that she'd worked on me, except with her, he was getting something I'd never offered: the promise of more. They weren't sleeping. Together, I didn't think. But there was an intimacy there, a special connection. Marcus started championing her in meetings, praising her initiative, suggesting she take on bigger projects. Never mind that I was the one actually doing the work, Lin May was the one getting the credit. And slowly, carefully, she started her campaign against me. It was subtle at first, a comment here and there about how I was particular about my processes. A gentle suggestion that maybe I should delegate more instead of holding onto accounts so tightly. A rueful admission that she'd tried to help me with something, but I'd insisted on doing it myself. She never said anything directly negative. She never had to. She just planted seeds and let Marcus's assumptions do the rest. Marcus started watching me more critically, asking pointed questions about my methods, suggesting that maybe I was resistant to change, stuck in old ways of doing things. He brought in a consultant to review our processes, and somehow all of the inefficiencies identified were in areas I managed. Never mind that those inefficiencies were actually complications inherent to the accounts themselves. Never mind that my resistance to change was actually expertise warning against bad ideas. Never mind that I'd been keeping this department running smoothly for years before he arrived. I was being positioned as the problem. I let it happen. I kept detailed documentation of everything. Every email from Marcus, every meeting note, every instance of Lin May taking credit for my work or subtly undermining me. I saved it all in a folder on my personal drive, organized and time-stamped. But I didn't fight back. I didn't defend myself. I didn't play their political games. I just kept working, kept being excellent at my job, kept making myself indispensable. And I waited. 8 months after Marcus arrived, David called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. "Close the door," he said, not meeting my eyes. I closed it and sat down, my heart beating faster even though I knew what was coming. "Zoe, this is a difficult conversation." He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. "As you know, Marcus has been working on restructuring the department to improve efficiency and reduce redundancy. And as part of that process, we've had to make some hard decisions about staffing." I said nothing. "You've been a valuable member of this team," he continued, "but we've decided to move in a different direction. We're going to be letting you go effective 2 weeks from today. We'll provide a severance package and a neutral reference, and of course, we'll need you to train Lin May on your accounts before you leave." There it was, the same speech, almost word for word. "I see," I said quietly. "Can I ask why?" David looked pained. "It's not about your technical skills. You're very competent. But Marcus feels that you've been resistant to his initiatives, and there have been concerns about your ability to work collaboratively with the team. Lin May has expressed, well, she's mentioned that you can be territorial about your accounts, and that it's been difficult for her to learn when you're not willing to delegate." I let the words hang there for a moment, watching him squirm. "That's not true," I said finally. "I've spent months training Lin May. I've documented all my processes. I've been nothing but collaborative." "I understand that's your perspective," David said, "but the decision has been made." "I'm sorry, Zoe. I really am." He wasn't sorry. He was relieved. Relieved that he didn't have to deal with the situation anymore. Relieved that Marcus's complaints would stop. Relieved that he could promote Lin May and make the problem go away. "Fine," I said. I'll train her on everything she needs to know." David looked surprised, probably expecting more of a fight. Thank you. I appreciate you being professional about this." I stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Just one question. Will Lin May be taking over all of my accounts?" "Yes, we'll be promoting her to senior accountant to handle the additional responsibility." Of course they would. "Got it," I said, and walked out. For the next 2 weeks, I was a model of professionalism. I scheduled training sessions with Lin May, walking her through each of my accounts in painstaking detail. I gave her access to all my files, all my documentation, all my carefully organized systems. I answered every question, no matter how basic. I stayed late to make sure she felt confident, and I made absolutely certain that everything looked completely transferred and completely understandable. The Chen Industries account, with its 17 subsidiaries and Byzantine ownership structure, I handed her the manual, walked her through the process step by step, and let her shadow me through one reconciliation cycle. I explained about the quarterly reports, the intercompany transfers, the special consolidation requirements. What I didn't explain was the informal understanding I had with their CFO, who would call me directly when there were issues instead of going through official channels. I didn't explain the nuances of their alternative ownership structure that wasn't fully documented anywhere. I didn't explain the historical context that made certain transaction patterns make sense. I gave her the recipe, but not the cooking technique. The Westfield investment portfolio. I showed her how to process the standard transactions, how to generate the monthly reports, how to handle the routine rebalancing. I gave her the login credentials, the procedural checklist, the contact information for their investment manager. What I didn't explain was that their standard investments were actually a cover for a much more complex alternative investment strategy, and that the real work happened in quarterly deep dive sessions where I'd spend hours reconciling their private equity positions, their hedge fund allocations, their real estate holdings. I didn't explain that the investment manager was useless for anything complicated and that I'd built a relationship directly with their family office administrator. The Harrison estate account? I walked her through the trust distributions, the tax reporting, the beneficiary management. I gave her the org chart, the distribution schedule, the annual planning calendar. What I didn't mention was that the Harrison family had been clients since before I was born, that they were deeply traditional and would only work with someone they trusted, and that trust took years to build. I didn't mention that old Mr. Harrison was sharp as a tack, but would occasionally call with rambling questions that seemed off topic but were actually testing whether you really understood his affairs. I didn't mention that his daughter-in-law hated the trust structure and would try to manipulate any new accountant into making distributions that weren't authorized. I gave Lynn May everything she needed to do the job, on paper. In reality, I was handing her a ticking time bomb. On my last day, the office threw me a small goodbye party. There was cake from the cheap bakery down the street, a card that everyone had signed with generic well wishes, and a gift card to a restaurant I'd never been to. Marcus didn't attend. He was in meetings. Lynn May gave me a hug that felt like a performance for everyone watching. "I'm going to miss you so much," she said, her eyes just slightly damp. "Thank you for everything you've taught me. I know I have big shoes to fill, but I'm going to do my best to make you proud." "I'm sure you'll do great," I said, and I almost meant it. I packed up my desk, the few personal items I'd accumulated over the years, the coffee mug my sister had given me, the framed picture of my parents, and walked out at 5 p.m. sharp. I didn't look back. I'd been planning my next move for months. In my first life, I'd scrambled after being fired, taking the first job I could find at a smaller firm with lower pay. I'd been so worried about the gap in my resume, so anxious about what people would think, that I'd settled for less than I was worth. This time, I'd been selective. I'd started networking 6 months ago, attending industry conferences, joining professional organizations, reconnecting with former colleagues who'd moved on to better things. I'd polished my resume and started selectively applying to positions that were a step up, not down. I'd been looking for the right opportunity, and I'd found it. Titan Financial Group was a boutique wealth management firm that specialized in high net worth clients. They were smaller than Chen and Associates but more prestigious, with a client roster that read like a who's who of the city's business elite. They'd been looking for a senior financial analyst to join their family office services division. I'd interviewed 3 weeks. I go using a dentist appointment as my excuse to David, and they'd made me an offer 2 days after that. The salary was 30% higher than what I was making at Chen & Associates. The title was better. The work was more interesting. But most importantly, they'd offered me something Chen & Associates never had: equity in the firm. I started at Titan the Monday after my last day at Chen & Associates. The office was in a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and modern art. My new boss, Catherine Wang, was in her 50s, whip-smart, and had built her division from the ground up. "Welcome aboard," she said, shaking my hand firmly. I've heard excellent things about you from Andrew Morrison. Andrew Morrison, the Harrison family attorney who I'd worked with extensively on estate planning matters, who I'd helped out of a jam 2 years ago when his junior associate had screwed up a trust distribution, who I'd stayed in touch with because that's what smart people did. Andrew's great, I said. I'm excited to be here. We're excited to have you. Your experience with complex family office structures is exactly what we need. I'm going to have you start by taking a look at the Westfield account. They've been asking about expanding their alternative investment strategy, and I think you'd be perfect to lead that initiative. I smiled. I'd be happy to. The Westfield account. How poetic. The first week at Titan was a whirlwind of onboarding, meeting my new colleagues, getting up to speed on their systems and processes. Everything was more sophisticated here, more streamlined. They had resources that Chen and Associates could only dream of. Research teams, technology platforms, dedicated support staff. I could get used to this. On Thursday of my second week, my personal phone rang during lunch. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. Zoe Lynn, this is Rachel Harrison. I sat up straighter. Rachel Harrison was the daughter-in-law I'd warned Lynn May about, the one who would try to manipulate her into unauthorized distributions. Mrs. Harrison, how can I help you? I'm calling about the trust distribution I requested last week. Lynn May said she'd process it right away, but I haven't seen it hit my account yet. Can you follow up with her? My heart rate picked up. Mrs. Harrison, I don't work at Chen and Associates anymore. Lynn May is handling your account now. A pause. You don't work there anymore? Since when? About a week and a half ago. Nobody told me that. Her voice sharpened. Where are you now? I'm at Titan Financial Group. Another pause, longer this time. I see. And this distribution I requested. Lynn May told me it was routine, that it wouldn't be a problem. What kind of distribution was it? I asked carefully. She described it and I closed my eyes. It was exactly what I'd thought. An early distribution from the trust that would trigger tax consequences and potentially violate the terms of the trust agreement. Old Mr. Harrison would be furious if it went through. Mrs. Harrison, I can't give you advice on an account I'm no longer managing, I said. But if I were you, I'd call Lynn May back and ask her to confirm the tax implications of that distribution with a tax attorney before processing it. And I'd also ask her to verify with the trustee that it's authorized under the trust terms. I see, she said coldly. Thank you for your time. She hung up. I sat there for a moment staring at my phone. Then I made a note in my personal files. Day 11. Rachel Harrison called about unauthorized distribution. The audit wasn't for another 2 weeks, but the cracks were already starting to show. The call from David came on a Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks after my last day. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I listened to it during my break. Zoe, it's David. Listen, I need to talk to you about something urgent. Can you call me back as soon as possible? It's about the Chen Industries account. Thanks. He sounded stressed. I didn't call back. Instead, I checked the industry news, scrolling through the usual updates about market trends and regulatory changes. And there, buried in the financial newswire, was a small item. Chen Industries announces surprise audit of all financial service providers following Q3 discrepancies. I smiled. Chen Industries performed routine internal audits every quarter, but external audits of their service providers only happened when something was wrong. I'd known this audit was coming because I'd lived through it before, except last time I'd been long gone and had only heard about it through the grapevine. This time, I had front my front row seat. David called again the next day, then the day after that. On the fourth call, he sent a follow-up email. Zoe, please call me. We need your help with the Chen Industries account. There are some questions that have come up during their audit, and Lynn May is having trouble finding the documentation. I let it sit in my inbox for 6 hours before responding. David, I'm no longer employed by Chen & Associates and am not in a position to provide consulting on your accounts. I suggest you review the documentation I prepared during my transition. Best of luck. Professional. distant, final. His response came within minutes. Zoe, please, this is urgent. We'll compensate you for your time. I didn't respond. That Friday, my personal phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. Stephen Chen, the CEO. I let it go to voicemail. Ms. Lin, this is Stephen Chen from Chen and Associates. I understand you're no longer with the firm, but we have a situation that requires your expertise. I'd like to discuss bringing you back as a consultant to help us resolve some issues with the Chen Industries account. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I saved the voicemail and sent a quick email to Catherine, my new boss. Heads up, my former employer is having some issues with an account I used to manage. They may try to contact you about bringing me in as a consultant. I'm not interested, but wanted to keep you informed. Catherine's response was immediate. Thanks for the heads up. If they contact me, I'll refer them back to you. Let me know if you need any support. Stephen Chen called twice more that day. David called 3 times. I ignored them all. On Monday, the other shoe dropped. Titan Financial Group receives consulting inquiry from Chen Industries. Read the subject line of an email from our business development team. I wasn't CC'd, but Catherine forwarded it to me with a note. Interesting timing. Want to take this? I called her instead of responding by email. Chen Industries reached out to us? I asked. Directly to our client services team. They're looking for help with a complex reconciliation issue related to their subsidiary holdings. They specifically asked if we had anyone with expertise in multi-entity consolidation and transfer pricing. That's oddly specific, isn't it? They didn't mention Chen and Associates by name, but I assume that's who's managing their account currently? It was when I left 3 weeks ago. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Would you like to take the meeting? I thought about it. Yes, I said finally. I would. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at Chen Industries' downtown headquarters. I dressed carefully that morning, my best suit, the one I'd bought for interviews but never had occasion to wear at Chen & Associates. I looked professional, polished, successful. I looked like someone who'd moved up, not someone who'd been fired. Catherine came with me. Moral support, she said, and also business development. If we play this right, Chen Industries could become a major client for us. We were shown into a conference room on the executive floor, all dark wood and leather chairs and original artwork. Assistant brought coffee and water, and we waited. The door opened, and 3 people walked in. First was James Chen, the CFO of Chen Industries and no relation to the Chen family that owned my former employer. I'd worked with him extensively over the years, and he'd always been professional and fair. Second was his senior financial analyst, a woman named Diana, whose last name I'd never learned but who was sharp and detail-oriented. Third was Marcus Chen. He stopped dead when he saw me, his face going pale. Ms. Lin, James Chen said, shaking my hand. Thank you for coming. I understand you recently left Chen & Associates? 3 weeks ago, I confirmed. I'm now with Titan Financial Group. Excellent firm. Catherine, good to see you as well. He shook her hand, then gestured for everyone to sit. Marcus remained standing, looking like he wanted to bolt. Marcus, please sit, James said mildly. You're making everyone nervous. Marcus sat, not looking at me. James opened a folder on the table. Let me be direct. We've been conducting a routine audit of our Q3 financials, and we've discovered some significant discrepancies in the work Chen & Associates has been doing for us. Given the complexity of our account, we wanted to bring in an outside expert to help us understand where things went wrong and how to fix them. I see, I said. And Marcus is here because... Marcus is here representing Chen & Associates, James said. We thought it would be helpful to have everyone in the same room. Marcus finally spoke. Zoe, we don't need outside consultants. This is just a minor reconciliation issue. Lin May is working on it, and we'll have it resolved shortly. It's been 3 weeks, Diana said, speaking for the first time. And the more she tries to resolve it, the worse it gets. Last week she told us she'd found the problem. This week she's saying she needs to start over from scratch. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of discrepancies are we talking about? James pulled out a spreadsheet, starting with the Q3 intercompany transfers. According to the reconciliation we received from Chen and Associates, there should be $2.3 million in transfers between our U.S. parent company and the Hong Kong subsidiary. But when we trace the transactions, we can only account for $1.8 million. $500,000 is missing? Catherine asked, her eyebrows rising. Not missing, misclassified, Diana said. We think. We found various amounts scattered across different accounts, but we can't figure out the logic behind how they were coded. I could have explained it in 30 seconds. The $500,000 she was looking at was probably split between 3 different transaction types based on the purpose of the transfer, and each type had specific tax and regulatory implications that required different handling. But I wasn't being paid to explain it yet. Have you asked Lin Mei about the classification logic? I asked. Marcus jumped in. She's reviewing the documentation that you prepared. Once she's had a chance to fully understand the system, the documentation should explain it, I said calmly. I spent 2 weeks training her on the account. If something's unclear, it should be in the manual. The manual explains the basic process, Diana said, but it doesn't explain the why behind the decisions. We need to understand the underlying logic, not just the steps. James was watching me carefully. Ms. Lin, in your time managing our account, did you ever have issues with these intercompany transfers? No, I said honestly, but I'd been working with your structure for 3 years. I understood the business logic behind each entity, the regulatory requirements, the tax optimization strategy. That kind of knowledge doesn't transfer easily. Could it transfer for the right price? James asked bluntly. Catherine stirred next to me, and I could practically feel her excitement. This was turning into exactly the opportunity she'd hoped for. Before I could answer, Marcus stood up. This is inappropriate. Zoe signed a non-compete agreement when she joined Chen and Associates. She can't just... Actually, I interrupted. I didn't. I was never given a non-compete. I checked my employment file before I left, and there's no record of one. This was true. In my first life, I'd assumed I must have signed one at some point and just forgotten. This time, I'd checked carefully. Chen and Associates had never bothered with non-competes for anyone below the director level. Marcus sat back down, looking sick. So, James said, turning back to me, could it transfer? I looked at Catherine, who gave me a small nod. Titan Financial Group would be happy to provide consulting services to help resolve the discrepancies, I said. We'd need to review the full scope of the issues first to provide an accurate quote, but our standard rate for this type of work is $500 per hour. I'd been making $75,000 a year at Chen and Associates, which worked out to about $36 an hour. The sweet taste of revenge was worth about $464 an hour, apparently. That's outrageous, Marcus said. You can't... We'll pay it, James said. Diana, work with Ms. Lin to schedule a full review. I want a preliminary assessment by end of week and a remediation plan by end of month. He stood, clearly dismissing us. Marcus looked like he wanted to say something, but James shot him a look that shut him up. As we were leaving, James caught my arm. Ms. Lin, a word? I nodded to Catherine to go ahead, and she left me alone with James and Diana. I want you to know, James said quietly, that we were never told you were leaving Chen and Associates. We had no idea there had been a transition until the audit started and Lin Mei couldn't answer basic questions about our account structure. I see, I said. If we had known, we would have asked to meet your replacement before the transition was finalized. This account is too important to us to risk on someone unproven. I appreciate that. Stephen Chen assured me personally that the transition would be seamless, James continued. He said your replacement was highly qualified and fully trained. That was, let's say, an overstatement. I said nothing. I'm going to be honest with you, James said. We're evaluating whether to continue our relationship with Chen and Associates at all. This isn't just about the reconciliation errors, it's about the lack of communication, the misrepresentation of capabilities, and frankly, the disrespect of not informing us when the person managing our account was leaving. That's a significant decision, I said carefully. It is, and it's one we'll make after we see whether these issues can be resolved. But I want you to know that if we do decide to make a change, Titan Financial Group would be on our short list of potential replacements. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. We'd be honored to be considered. After they left, I stood in the conference room for a moment, looking out at the city skyline. In my first life, I'd heard through the grapevine that Chen Industries had eventually left Chen and Associates after 6 months of ongoing problems. I'd heard it had been a huge blow to the firm, both financially and reputationally, but I'd never known the full story. I'd never known that they'd tried to find me, that they'd wanted me back. This time, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what had been lost. The preliminary assessment took me 3 days. Catherine assigned me 2 junior analysts to help with the grunt work, and we set up shop in one of Titan's conference rooms, spreading out 3 years' worth of Chen Industries financial records. The errors were worse than I'd expected. Lin Mei hadn't just misclassified the intercompany transfers. She'd fundamentally misunderstood how the subsidiary structure worked. She'd been treating the Hong Kong entity as a simple branch office instead of a separate legal entity with its own reporting requirements. She'd been netting transfers instead of tracking them separately. She'd been using the wrong exchange rates for currency conversions, and that was just Q3. When I dug into Q2, I found more problems. She'd missed an entire subsidiary in the consolidation. She'd double-counted certain revenue streams. She'd failed to account for intercompany eliminations, making the consolidated financials useless. Q1 was even worse. "How did nobody catch this sooner?" asked Marcus Wong, one of the junior analysts Catherine had assigned to me. Not Marcus Chen. This Marcus was smart, detail-oriented, and wouldn't have made these mistakes in his first week of work. "Because the quarterly reports looked fine on the surface," I said. "The total numbers roughly matched expectations. It's only when you dig into the details that you see the problems." "But wouldn't the Chen Industries internal team catch it?" "Eventually, yes, that's why the audit found it. But their internal team relies on us, well, on Chen and Associates, to do the detailed work correctly. They're reviewing for reasonableness, not recalculating everything from scratch." So basically, Lin Mei was producing reports that looked right but were fundamentally wrong? Exactly. I worked late that Thursday, pulling together the preliminary assessment. Catherine checked in around 8 p.m. carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing me one. "You're a lifesaver." She sat down across from me, looking at the spreadsheets covering the table. "How bad is it?" "Bad. I'm estimating it'll take 200-300 hours to fully remediate. And that's if we start from scratch and rebuild the last 3 quarters of work." Catherine whistled. "At $500 an hour, that's $100,000 to $150,000, plus the cost of any tax penalties or regulatory issues that come from the errors. Chen Industries might be looking at another $50,000 to $100,000 in compliance costs. And Chen and Associates is responsible for all of it?" "They should be, yes, though actually collecting will depend on their professional liability insurance and their appetite for litigation." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "This is going to destroy them, isn't it?" I looked up at her. "The errors? Or the loss of the account?" "Both." I thought about David's office, about the desperate voicemails, about Marcus's pale face in the conference room. I thought about Lin Mei, probably working late right now trying to figure out where she'd gone wrong, finally understanding that she was in way over her head. I thought about my old desk, about the 5 years I'd spent there, about all the late nights and early mornings and weekends I'd given them. "Yes," I said, "it probably will." "Do you feel bad about that?" It was a fair question. Catherine was watching me carefully, and I knew she was evaluating more than just my technical skills. She wanted to know what kind of person I was, whether I was someone who took pleasure in others' suffering. "I feel bad for the people who had nothing to do with this," I said slowly. Patricia, the office manager, Jerry in IT. The junior accountants who are going to lose their jobs when the firm has to downsize. They didn't do anything wrong. But not for the people who did? I met her eyes. I gave them everything they needed to succeed. I documented my processes. I trained my replacement. I tried to warn them that the account was complex. They chose to ignore all of that because it was easier to believe I was the problem than to acknowledge they were making a mistake. So, no, I don't feel bad for them. Catherine nodded slowly. Good. Because in this industry, you can't let people take advantage of your competence. You did the right thing by leaving when you did. I didn't have much choice. They fired me. But you landed on your feet. And now you're in a position to show them exactly what they lost. She stood up, gathering her coffee cup. Finish up the assessment. Tomorrow we're going to go present it to James Chen, and we're going to make damn sure he knows that you're the reason this can be fixed. The presentation meeting was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. I arrived at Chen Industries at 1:45, assessment report printed and bound, wearing my best suit and my best poker face. Catherine was with me again, and this time she'd brought Andrew Kim, one of Titan's senior partners. We want Chen Industries to know we're taking this seriously, Catherine had explained. Andrew's presence shows that this has the attention of our leadership. James Chen was there, along with Diana and two other members of their finance team. Marcus Chen was notably absent. Thank you for coming, James said. I understand you have preliminary findings for us? I opened my report. Nah. Yes, I've completed a comprehensive review of the last 3 quarters of work performed by Chen and Associates on your account. What I've found is extensive and systemic errors across multiple areas. I walked them through it, slide by slide. The misclassified transfers, the missing subsidiary, the double-counted revenue, the incorrect consolidations, the regulatory reporting failures. Their faces got progressively grimmer. The total financial impact is difficult to quantify precisely at this stage, I said, but I estimate you're looking at $75,000 to $100,000 in tax penalties and compliance costs due to incorrect reporting. Additionally, your Q1, Q2, and Q3 financial statements are materially misstated and will need to be revised and reissued. Jesus Christ, one of the finance team members muttered. The good news, I continued, is that all of this can be fixed. It will require rebuilding the last 3 quarters of work from source documents, but the underlying data is sound. The errors are in the processing and presentation, not in the transactions themselves. How long will the remediation take? James asked. I estimate 250-300 hours of work, depending on what additional issues we uncover as we dig deeper. Titan can provide a dedicated team to work on this, and we can have it completed within 6 weeks. And the cost? At our standard consulting rate of $500 per hour, the remediation will cost $125,000 to $150,000. James didn't flinch at the number. And who would be leading the team? I would, I said. With support from 2 analysts who I'll personally train on your account structure. When can you start? Monday. James looked at his team, then back at me. Do it. Diana will be your point of contact on our end. I want weekly status updates and immediate notification of any additional issues you find. Understood. One more thing, James said. I want a full accounting of what went wrong and why, not for litigation purposes, though we may pursue that separately, but because I need to understand how this happened so we can prevent it from happening again. I glanced at Catherine, who nodded. I can provide that, I said, but it's not going to be comfortable reading. I don't need comfortable, I need accurate. I spent the weekend preparing for the engagement. On Monday morning, I arrived at Chen Industries at 7 a.m. with my 2 analysts, Marcus Wong and Jennifer Liu, both sharp and eager to prove themselves. We'd been given a conference room to work from, and Diana had arranged for us to have full access to all of Chen Industries' financial systems. This is like Christmas, Marcus said, looking at the multi-monitor setup Diana had arranged for us. I've never had this kind of access to a client's systems. Don't get used to it, I said. Most clients don't trust outside consultants this much. The fact that they're giving us direct access tells you how desperate they are to fix this. We dug in. The work was tedious, meticulous, and deeply satisfying. Every error I found, I documented carefully what the error was, what it should have been, what the impact was, and most importantly, where the error came from. Most of them traced back to fundamental misunderstandings on Lin Mei's part. She'd been given the procedures but hadn't understood the underlying principles. She'd followed the steps without grasping the why behind them. Some errors, though, were worse. There were places where she'd clearly been guessing, making up classifications when she wasn't sure what the right answer was. There were transactions she'd simply skipped because they seemed too complicated. There were questions she should have asked, but hadn't. And then there were the errors that weren't hers at all. On Wednesday, I found something interesting in the Q2 files, a series of journal entries that had been manually adjusted after Lin Mei's initial processing. The adjustments were signed off by Marcus Chen. I pulled up the original entries and compared them to the adjustments. Lin Mei had actually coded the transactions correctly, but Marcus had changed them, apparently thinking he knew better. He hadn't. His changes had introduced errors that cascaded through the rest of the quarter's work, throwing off the consolidation and creating the revenue double counting issue. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Lin Mei was incompetent, but Marcus was worse. He was incompetent and arrogant. He'd assumed he understood the account better than the person doing the actual work, and he'd made changes without bothering to verify his assumptions. "Found something?" Jennifer asked, noticing my expression. "Yeah," I said. I think I just found the smoking gun." I documented everything: the original entries, the adjustments, the resulting errors, and most importantly, the timestamp and sign-off showing that Marcus had made the changes personally. Then I called Catherine. "We have a problem," I said when she answered. "Or rather, Chen and Associates has a bigger problem than we thought." I explained what I'd found. "That's not just negligence," Catherine said. That's active interference. He changed correct work and made it wrong." "I know." "You need to tell James Chen." "I know that too, but Catherine, this is going to escalate things. Marcus is related to Stephen Chen, the CEO of Chen and Associates. This isn't just going to embarrass the firm, it's going to create a family conflict." "Is that your problem?" I thought about Marcus's hand on Lin Mei's back, his confident dismissal of my concerns, his assumption that he knew better than everyone else. "No," I said. "It's not my problem at all." I asked for a meeting with James Chen that afternoon. He came down to our war room looking tired. "What's wrong now?" "I found something you need to see," I said, pulling up the documentation on the screen. "These are the Q2 revenue entries for your Southeast Asian operations. Lin Mei coded them correctly based on the source, documents. I showed him her original work. But then someone made manual adjustments after the fact. I pulled up the adjustment entries. These changes introduced errors that made it look like you were double counting revenue between the Singapore and Malaysia entities. The adjustments are signed off by Marcus Chen." James leaned closer, reading the screen. His jaw tightened. "Are you telling me that Marcus Chen changed correct work and made it wrong?" "Yes." "Why the hell would he do that?" "I can't speak to his motivations," I said carefully. "But based on the pattern of changes, I believe he thought the original coding was too complicated and tried to simplify it. Unfortunately, the complexity was necessary to reflect the actual business structure." James straightened up, his face dark. "How much of the total errors are attributable to his changes versus Lin Mei's work?" I'd been expecting this question and had already run the numbers. Approximately 40% of the dollar to value of the errors stem from Marcus's adjustments. The remaining 60% are from Lin Mei's original mistakes. Jesus, James ran his hand through his hair. "Does Chen and Associates know about this?" "I have no idea. I only discovered it this morning." "Show me everything. I want a complete breakdown of which errors are Lin Mei's and which are Marcus's." It took us another 2 days to complete the full analysis, but the results were damning. Lin Mei had made mistakes, yes. She'd misunderstood the account structure, misclassified transactions, and missed entire subsidiaries. But most of her errors could be attributed to inexperience and insufficient training. Marcus's errors were different. He'd actively overridden correct work, changed classifications without understanding the implications, and introduced errors that someone with his level of experience should have caught. Worse, there were notes in the system showing that Lin May had questioned some of his changes. She'd sent him emails asking if he was sure about certain adjustments, pointing out that they differed from the documented procedures. He'd told her to implement his changes anyway and to stop questioning his decisions. "This is bad," Catherine said when I showed her the complete analysis. "This isn't just about incompetence anymore. This is about a toxic management culture that silenced legitimate concerns." I know. James Chen is going to take this to Stephen Chen. I know that too. And Stephen Chen is going to have to choose between protecting his nephew and protecting his business. I thought about that for a moment. In my first life, I'd never known the full extent of what had gone wrong. I'd just heard that Chen Industries had left and that Chen and Associates had struggled afterward. But this time, I knew everything, and I was about to make sure everyone else did too. "Not my problem," I said. "I'm just the consultant documenting what I find." The final report was 127 pages long. It included a complete breakdown of every error, the root cause of each error, the responsible party, and the remediation steps required. It included the email chains showing Lin May's questions and Marcus's dismissals. It included a timeline showing when each error was introduced and when it should have been caught. It was comprehensive, damning, and absolutely factual. James Chen read it in silence, his face getting progressively darker. When he finished, he set it down carefully like it might explode. "This is going to destroy them," he said quietly. "That's not my intention," I started. "I know it's not. You're just reporting the facts. But facts like these don't stay contained." He tapped the report. "I'm going to have to send this to our legal team. We're going to pursue recovery of our losses from Chen and Associates, which means this report will become the part of discovery. It'll all come out." I said nothing. "I also want you to know," James continued, "that we've decided to terminate our relationship with Chen and Associates effective immediately. We'll be engaging Titan Financial Group as our new accounting firm." My heart jumped, but I kept my voice steady. "That's a significant decision. It's the only decision that makes sense. We can't trust them anymore. And frankly, we should have made the change as soon as we learned you'd left. We assumed they'd maintain the same level of service, and that was naive. What about the remediation work? You'll complete that as planned, and then you'll transition the account to ongoing management under Titan's normal engagement structure. Catherine and I have already discussed the terms." This was it. This was the moment I'd been working toward for months, the complete vindication, the proof that I'd been the valuable one all along. "We'd be honored to serve you," I said. James stood up and offered his hand. "Thank you, Zoe. I know this can't have been easy, reviewing your own work and documenting someone else's failures. You've been nothing but professional throughout this entire mess." After he left, I sat in the conference room for a long moment, staring at the report on the table. In 6 weeks, I'd accomplished what had taken 6 months in my first life. I'd exposed the truth, claimed the account for my new firm, and positioned myself as the expert who'd saved the day. Lin May and Marcus had destroyed themselves. I'd just documented it. The fallout was spectacular. Chen Industries' legal team sent a formal demand letter to Chen and Associates, seeking reimbursement of $175,000 in remediation costs, tax penalties, and compliance fees. The letter included my full report as an attachment, leaving no doubt about who was responsible for what. Stephen Chen called me personally 3 days later. "Zoe, this is Stephen Chen. I need to talk to you about this report you prepared." "Mr. Chen, I'm not sure that's appropriate. I was engaged by Chen Industries to conduct an independent assessment. Anything I discussed with you could compromise that independence." "I'm not asking you to compromise anything. I just want to understand, did you have to be so specific about who made which errors? You've essentially accused my nephew of professional negligence." "I documented what I found," I said evenly. "Every statement in that report is supported by source documents, system logs, and email records. If you'd like to dispute any of my findings, you're welcome to conduct your own review." That's not, look, we're prepared to settle with Chen Industries. We'll cover their losses. But this report makes it very difficult for us to resolve this quietly. Again, that's not my concern. I was hired to determine what went wrong and how to fix it. I did both. There was a long pause. You've really moved up in the world, haven't you? Titan Financial Group is a significant step up from working here. It is. And I suppose taking our largest client with you is just a coincidence? I felt a flash of anger. I didn't take anything. Chen Industries chose to leave because they no longer trusted your firm's ability to serve them competently. That's a direct result of the errors documented in my report, errors I didn't make. No, you just documented them very, very thoroughly. Would you have preferred I lied? Another pause. No, of course not. This is going to be very difficult for us. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was surprised to find that I partly meant it. Not sorry enough to change anything, but sorry in the abstract way you feel bad when someone faces consequences for their own actions. For what it's worth, Stephen said, I'm sorry about how things ended with you. David said it was a performance issue, but clearly that wasn't accurate. No, it wasn't. If you ever want to come back, I won't, I said firmly. But thank you for the thought. After I hung up, I found Catherine waiting, outside my office. Was that Stephen Chen? She asked. Yes. What did he want? To make me feel guilty about the report, I think. Or to see if there was some way to minimize the damage. And I told him the truth. I documented what I found. And what I found is that his firm failed spectacularly. Catherine smiled, saying, Good, because I just got off the phone with James Chen. They're not going to settle quietly. They're going to file a formal complaint with the State Accounting Board about Chen and Associates' handling of their account. My eyes widened. That's public record, yes. Every accounting firm in the state will know about it. Every potential client will see it. It'll be very, very difficult for Chen and Associates to win new business after this. Jesus. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, Catherine said cheerfully. Now let's talk about your new role. James Chen was very impressed with your work, and he's already referring us to 2 other companies. He's on the board of, I'm creating a new senior position for you, Director of Family Office Services. You'll be managing high net worth clients with complex needs, and you'll have a team of 3 analysts working under you. I stared at her. In my first life, I died as a senior accountant making $75,000 a year. Now I was being offered a director position at a better firm with better clients. What's the compensation? I managed to ask. $180,000 base, plus bonus based on client retention and new business development. Equity in the firm starting at 2% with the option to increase based on performance. It was more than twice what I'd been making. It was more than I'd ever imagined making. I don't know what to say, I said honestly. Say yes. You've earned this, Zoe. You've proven that you can handle complex accounts, manage client relationships, and deliver under pressure. This is just the beginning. I thought about my old desk at Chen & Associates, about the generic goodbye card, and the cheap bakery cake. I thought about David's half-hearted promises of promotion and Marcus's dismissive attitude. I thought about dying alone in an office at 9:47 p.m. Yes, I said, absolutely yes. The accounting board's formal investigation took 3 months. During that time, Chen & Associates lost 4 more major clients. Turns out that when word gets out that you botched an account badly enough to trigger a formal complaint, other clients start wondering if you're botching theirs too. David left the firm quietly, taking a position at a smaller company in another city. Patricia, the office manager, reached out to me to ask if Titan was hiring. We brought her on as our operations manager, and she fit in perfectly. Jerry from IT found something better too. Half the junior accountants were laid off. And Lynn May, I heard through the grapevine that she'd been demoted to an entry-level position, no longer allowed to touch any client accounts unsupervised. She'd tried to find another job, but her reputation had been destroyed. The accounting community in our city was small and everyone knew what had happened. She lasted 6 more months at Chen and Associates before leaving the industry entirely. Last I heard, she was working in retail. Marcus Chen was a different story. The accounting board found that while he'd made errors, they didn't rise to the level of sanctionable misconduct. He'd been operating within his authority as a department head, even if his judgment had been poor. But his career was still over, at least in this city. Stephen Chen quietly pushed him out of the firm, and Marcus moved to another state, where he took a mid-level position at a company his family had no connection to. I heard he was doing fine. Not great, but fine. I didn't care. 1 year after being fired, I was sitting in my new office, a real office with a door and a window, not a cubicle, reviewing a potential new client's portfolio when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Zoe Lynn. Zoe? It's Lynn May. I sat up straighter, my hand tightening on the phone. Lynn May, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I know, I wasn't sure if you'd even take my call. Her voice was different than I remembered, smaller, less confident. I wanted to apologize. Apologize. For what happened. For what I said about you to Marcus. For taking your job, for everything. I was stupid and ambitious, and I thought I could do what you did, and I was so wrong. I said nothing, waiting. I lost everything, she continued, and now her voice was shaking. My job, my reputation, my career. I can't get hired anywhere in the industry. Everyone knows what happened, and they all think I'm incompetent. You made mistakes, I said neutrally. I made mistakes because I was in over my head, and I was too proud to admit it. I should have asked for help. I should have been honest about not understanding the accounts. Instead, I tried to fake it, and I destroyed everything. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved better. You were good to me, and I repaid you by stabbing you in the back, and I want you to know that I'm sorry, and that I learned my lesson even though it came way too late. I thought about all the things I could say. I could tell her that her apology meant nothing, that she'd gotten exactly what she deserved, that I'd orchestrated the whole thing from the beginning. But what would be the point? I appreciate you calling, I said finally. I hope things work out for you. Thank you. And Zoe, congratulations on your new position. I saw the announcement. You've done really well for yourself. I have, yeah. After she hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone. I'd wanted revenge, and I'd gotten it. I'd wanted vindication, and I'd gotten that too. I'd wanted to prove that I was the valuable one, the competent one, the one they never should have let go. Mission accomplished. So why did I feel so empty? Catherine found me still sitting there 20 minutes later. Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Lynn May just called to apologize. Seriously? What did she say? I gave her the summary, and Catherine shook her head. Too little, too late. She destroyed her own career. You just documented it. I know. But you feel bad anyway. A little, yeah. Catherine sat down across from me. Can I tell you something? When I started in this industry, I was a lot like you. I worked hard, kept my head down, assumed that merit would be rewarded. And I got screwed over, just like you did. Someone took credit for my work. I got pushed out, and I spent years rebuilding. What did you do? I got angry, I got strategic, and I built something better than what I'd lost. That's what you're doing now, Zoe. You're not getting revenge, you're getting justice. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Revenge is about making someone else suffer. Justice is about making things right. You didn't set out to destroy Lynn May or Marcus. You set out to protect yourself and prove your worth. The fact that they destroyed themselves in the process is not your fault. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But I knew, I said quietly. I knew they would fail. I knew the audit would find errors. I knew Chen Industries would leave. I knew all of it, and I let it happen. Catherine looked at me steadily. Did you sabotage the account? No. Did you give Lynn May false information? No. Did you do anything other than your job? No. Then you have nothing to feel guilty about. You documented your processes, you trained your replacement, and you moved on to something better. The fact that you had a pretty good idea of how things would shake out doesn't change that. She was right. Intellectually, I knew she was right, but emotionally, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd manipulated the situation, that I'd used my foreknowledge to set Lynn May and Marcus up for a fall. Look, Catherine said, you're going to have to make peace with this, because in this industry, there will always be people trying to take advantage of you. There will always be someone trying to take credit for your work, or undermine you, or push you out. You can't control that. All you can control is how you respond. And how should I respond? By being so damn good at what you do that they can't function without you. By documenting everything. By building your own value independently of any single employer. By being strategic about who you trust and who you help. She smiled. By being exactly what you are now, someone who learned from being burned and came back stronger. 2 years after my rebirth, I was managing a portfolio of 12 high net worth clients, had a team of 5 analysts working under me, and had been promoted to senior director. Titan Financial Group had grown significantly, largely on the strength of the clients I'd brought in. James Chen had been true to his word about referrals, and those referrals had led to more referrals. My division was now the most profitable part of the firm. I'd also started mentoring junior accountants, sharing what I'd learned about office politics, client management, and self-advocacy. I made sure they knew to document everything, to value themselves appropriately, and to never let themselves be taken advantage of. Some of them probably thought I was cynical, but the ones who'd been burned before understood. Chen and Associates still existed, but barely. They'd lost more than half their clients and had downsized significantly. Stephen Chen had sold his stake and retired, leaving the firm to be managed by a group of junior partners who were still trying to rebuild its reputation. I heard that Marcus had moved to the East Coast and was working for a family friend's company. Lynn May had indeed left, accounting entirely, and was managing a boutique clothing store. David had landed on his feet at a mid-sized firm where he could coast on his existing relationships without having to actually do much work. And me? I bought my parents a house. I took vacations to places I'd only dreamed about before. I invested in my future, building a portfolio that would ensure I never had to depend on any single employer ever again. But most importantly, I lived. In my first life, I died at my desk, alone and unappreciated, having given everything to a company that saw me as disposable. This time, I made sure my value was undeniable. I made sure I had options. I made sure that if anyone tried to push me out, they'd regret it. And I made sure I never, ever worked myself to death for people who didn't deserve it. 5 years after my rebirth, I got an email that made me laugh out loud. It was from a recruiter reaching out on behalf of Chen and Associates. They were looking for a senior director of client services, someone with extensive experience managing complex accounts and building client relationships. Would I be interested in discussing the opportunity? I showed the email to Catherine, who laughed just as hard as I had. Are they serious? She asked. Apparently. What are you going to say? I thought about it for a moment, then typed out a response. Thank you for reaching out. I'm very happy in my current role at Titan Financial Group and am not looking to make a change. Best of luck in your search. Short, professional, and absolutely final. I hit send and closed my laptop. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. On a Tuesday evening, 7 years after my rebirth, I was working late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to finish reviewing a new client proposal before tomorrow's meeting. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Wong, one of my analysts. Still at the office? You need to learn work-life balance, boss. I smiled and texted back, says the person who texted me at 9 p.m. Touché, but seriously, you should go home. This can wait until tomorrow. He was right. I saved my work, shut down my computer, and gathered my things. As I walked through the empty office, I thought about another Tuesday evening in another life when I'd stayed late to finish a quarterly reconciliation that nobody else knew how to do. I thought about the pressure behind my eyes, the cramping in my hand, the sudden darkness. This time, I wasn't staying until I collapsed. This time, I was choosing to be here and I was choosing to leave. This time, I was in control. I stepped out into the spring night, breathing in air that tasted like possibility, and I thought about all the things I still wanted to do. The clients I wanted to win, the people I wanted to mentor, the life I wanted to build. I'd been given a second chance and I'd used it to rewrite my story, not just the ending, the whole damn thing. And this time, I was going to make sure it was a story worth living.